Matt Langley is a procurement and sustainability leader who has embedded sustainability into more than 25 years of procurement practice. He has led global centres of excellence across sourcing, category management, analytics, and supplier management. At CBRE, the largest real estate company globally, Matt led procurement operations, technology transformation, data, risk, and ESG. At CBRE, he built a first of its kind net zero supply chain program and product. Matt is the 2024 European CIPS Sustainable Procurement Champion, a regular speaker and judge at CIPS events, a former Sustainable Procurement Pledge Scope 3 co-chair, and current Emerging Tech co-chair. He has advised Green Project Technology and Emitwise, a carbon accounting and supply chain decarbonising startup, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Matt has published 2 books.
Sustainable Procurement in Action, we're going to run through circular procurement. That is a key aspect of sustainability. And actually, interestingly, it's Australia that's leading in this space. A lot of other countries are focusing more on the overall carbon and reporting requirements. Australia's gone a bit further into the circularity, which I really like. So what is circular procurement? So it's not just recycling. And I worked with a ex-colleague of mine at CBRE to create a book around this. And I heard her saying this so many times and very patiently saying, no, that's linear. And so it really is, how do you create a product, then use it, and then pass it on so it gets reused? And so, and that isn't just recycling. That is really what you can keep repairing and reusing the product for. And you kind of think, wow, how does this relate to sustainability and carbon emissions? Well, every time you buy something new, it's got carbon associated with it. If you repair something and continue using it, you're only paying or covering the carbon emissions from the repair that happens. And so circular procurement starts becoming a key component. I'll talk about that a bit later. But yeah, really circular procurement is not recycling. It's really around a core component of sustainability, which is how do I do more with less? And how do I, repair, reuse, refurbish, and remanufacture? And that kind of sounds easy, like, well, you just go out and get it repaired. But unless you actually think through some components of this, then it's really easy to get into that linear approach. And you've got a whole bunch of interesting aspects coming in around the digital passports and the components of a product that Europe is looking to drive as well. And so you're really trying to recover the value at the end of use, and you're really shifting your whole thinking around how do you buy things? How do you turn it from, I bought this furniture to I rent this furniture, or I'm going to reuse the furniture I have because I can then repair it, and then I work with the designers to then look to bring that in. And probably the best example I have here was when I was at CBRE. There was a major banking client in London that consolidated 5 buildings into one. And they then, CBRE got involved, or the team thinking through some of this a couple of weeks before they had to then start working through that consolidation. And they asked about the furniture, and the client said, oh, look, it's got a zero cost on the balance sheet, so we bought £5 million worth of new furniture. And so CBRE was able to recover about £1.5 million of the current furniture they had, which was high quality. It's a bank. So and they'd bought the furniture 5 years earlier, and then they were doing the refit 5 years, which is normal. But the warranty of the furniture was for 10 years and can last 20 years. And so basically, then you're like, oh, well, then they would have recycled some of this, or refurbished it. And effectively, it then goes out into charity, and then it gets sent to Africa, and then ends up in their waste, and so there's a whole mess with it. But basically, the issue was that because it had a zero balance in the balance sheet, it was considered that it was not valuable, and yet it still had this value from a carbon perspective and all the components. So to me, that's a great use case of, unless you change your thinking, then the linear is the one that's going to be the one that you really just by default end up following. So how do you actually make it happen with circular procurement? And so this is where you need to really think through, and you need a whole cultural change coming in. But from a procurement perspective, it starts with the categories. And that's why we wrote the book really around fixture fit outs and facilities, because there's a lot that can go in there. IT has some aspects in there that's a little bit harder. Packaging is a good opportunity. Construction is interesting. Again, in London, don't know in Australia if this has happened, but they've reused the shells of buildings, so they haven't really added any more concrete when they've done fit outs. And then obviously equipment can be looked to do a lot more. When I was at Metcash and the MHE or the lift equipment, you could look to do a reasonable amount there and keep them running a lot longer. So think through the specific categories that work for you, and then you've got to change the specifications. You've got to work with the designers, because they'll come in and want to integrate desks into buildings, and so it looks really pretty. But then again, after 5 years, you're ripping it all out because the lease is finished or it's time for a refit. Where if you use modular, or that you have a take back requirement from the supplier, then you're able to really continue to use that. It's not going to landfill. And it means that you end up, again, potentially spending more money upfront because you're buying more durable repairability type solution. But then over the total cost of ownership, the life of that product, then it ends up being a lot cheaper because you're not buying it just for 5 years. So then you need to think through, okay, great, I want to now use furniture, and so I've agreed with the head of real estate that I'm going to spend a bit more money, have a 10-year warranty for a good product, it's modular, and that all works. And then it breaks down or something needs repair. So unless you've kind of thought through some of this repair and spare parts, then you're going to quite often see this, you repair the arm or the leg or the wheel at the bottom, unless there's a method in place where the supplier takes it back and provides it to you, or there's a company like eCopX that I also advise to that has that circular thinking and can look to provide that repair where it's needed, and the logistics and the warehousing. Because often you find that companies will store things just in case. So they have these monster warehouses that they're spending a lot of money with. But today they can have a replit or some sort of solution where they can put all the assets onto this, and if they don't need it between the different divisions, then they can sell it or buy things as they need. This sort of stuff then needs a bit more lead time. It's not the same as buying something new, and so again, you need to think through the ecosystem that goes around what you've got here, and there are a lot of companies that really can support that. And so then it means that you're writing a different RFP, right? You might be instead of CapEx, I want to go and purchase this furniture, you're like, OpEx, I want to rent this furniture over a longer term, and then you've got the take back or the requirements that kind of come in, and the KPIs and things, really to get to this fifth level that you're measuring it, you've reduced your carbon, you've reduced your waste, you've extended the life. And this is where you want to engage with your staff. So they're saying, oh, what a cheap company, they're just using reused furniture. Like, no, there's a whole purpose around it, and potentially it's a bit more expensive, or that procurement has taken longer to run this RFP than they did previously, because it's not just a sourcing event anymore. It's like building a whole ecosystem, and spending more time with suppliers and understanding how all that fits. That you want your staff to realize that, yeah, this is around reducing the carbon or reducing the impact on landfill, and there's a lot of benefit coming in over the total cost of ownership of it, but also, you know, a good case study of how a company is living the values of the environmental and net zero commitments that they've made. So I alluded to this at the start. Circular procurement really is a key component of any sustainable procurement strategy. And so these are the six main elements of a sustainable procurement strategy. And it depends on your company as to which hooks you want to use. So at CBRE, I started with risk. I wanted to look to leverage EcoVadis and understand how sustainable my supply chain was, then how resilient my supply chain was, and if there are any issues in it, what could I look to do? Others have started with climate, what are the carbon emissions, and then you're able to, the circularity then feeds into that by that lower carbon emissions, so you're not having to replace the entire product, you're just doing components of it. Your circular procurement also sits within that nature aspect, that you're not using all the components and you're reducing your waste, and so that can be useful. Then you've always got this social value and diversity as a component that you can look to do. The supplier engagement and the category management are there other key aspects that you need to really work within. So there's a whole bunch of benefits of circular procurement, and as I said at the start, it's fantastic that Australia is really world leading in this space and has thought through and has some really good examples around what they're doing at a government and at a city level, and you can look to build quite interesting programs here, and there's quite a lot of resources that.
Thank you, Matt. So appreciate that overview. That was very informative. Just a couple of questions dawned on me throughout your presentation, and I think you've partly answered these, but it might be an opportunity to get a little bit deeper with a view to the roles and the interests of our students in our University of Queensland and also CIPS education programs. One is, in terms of any distinctions between public sector and private sector in terms of influencing. So you made it very clear that the economic consideration, the balance sheet value that you mentioned about the bank, and ready to write it off, I thought that was a very interesting point. In public sector, a lot of the thinking, of course, extends well beyond the financial statements as they seek to, support service delivery, often in areas that they work in. In terms of trying to influence leadership and management, any suggestions or any observations that you've seen that's worked well in the public context, whether it's local government, across a state department or agencies like a health or Commonwealth?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting area because you can, a lot of governments are having a buy local or buy Australia. And for smaller markets like Australia, then often you're not producing everything, but you have a great ecosystem of repair folks, or you can look to, if you're a large office in a small location, you can almost have someone working full time helping you develop this. So that's where I was talking about how you actually need to think about the repairs and maintenance and the ecosystem. And those, you don't send it off overseas to repaired, you have it sorted locally. So you can actually help build the local economy. and provided local jobs by thinking through some of these aspects. So yes, it might be manufactured overseas, but the repair, the warehousing, and the manage of it can be done locally.
So we can see roles for small businesses participating constructively in circular procurement, because part of, I guess, the concern that I've had is that when a lot of this translates into compliance, it's the savvy large organisations who build teams responding to tenders, who know exactly how to tick the right boxes, and sometimes this relative burden is unmanageable by small businesses.
Yeah.
Have you seen any creative or interesting ways in which buyers can sort of respond to that? Is that around supporting smaller businesses, or is it in the writing of the requirements documents? Any observations on that, Matt?
Yeah, I think those are the key ones, right? That you need to just when you're trying to bring diverse suppliers into your supply chain or local suppliers, if you run a national tender, that's not going to work. And so you need to break it off, which takes a bit more time and effort from a procurement category manager perspective or sourcing perspective. And we've been taught like bigger is better, like a bigger RFP or more scope, then you get more cost savings, and so, but that then makes it a lot harder to bring in the local teams that can maybe only do a small part of the geography, or a diverse supplier that you need to spend time growing. So yeah, you need to rethink the scope that you have in the RFP, some of the requirements, what's available, how you can look to support the local suppliers. So the RFP is important, and then you need to think through the ecosystem and the supplier engagement and support that you provide to them. Just again, similar to a diverse supplier, that you can't take them from a small local area to then give them a national contract. Any company is going to fall over if they have to expand that quickly. So you need to kind of give them a small location, work with them, give them feedback, get them to learn, and then they can expand out. So that is a little bit why this doesn't happen as often, because there's more effort involved and there's a bit more risk as well,
Yes.
that you're relying on smaller companies. But it is better for the local community. It is better for the resilience of what you need. You're not relying on overseas suppliers that might have logistics issues because, I don't know, there's a war in the Middle East that suddenly happens, or a strait is closed or something else. And so you're kind of building that resilience into your supply chain, which I think is important.
And I think those themes that you've touched on as well, in terms of supporting small business, regional businesses, are areas certainly that public sector makes claims to be interested in supporting through policy. Sometimes the policy is not elegant in its execution, but I guess at least it's open for a conversation. It's not all about the short-term bottom line or next quarter of half yearly earnings. So I
Yeah.
guess for our public sector category managers and procurement professionals, there's a different message to craft in terms of circular and its role. And the inevitable effort, whether we're talking about sustainability more broadly or circular procurement, I guess that's something that leadership necessarily entails in this space, right? So there's probably no way to really shortcut that. And maybe on a similar theme to that, you touched a little bit on this idea that employees like to work in organisations that care about, the environment. Can you touch on any further thoughts in relation to how organisational culture, the alignment between perhaps particularly some of the younger generations' personal values and concerns around environment can tie into, genuine demonstrations of implementation of circular procurement?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I've, as we said in the introduction, 25 years in procurement. So I've been a bit hardcore commercial. And I wrote the book circular procurement in action with Helene Carpenter that I work with at CBRE, and she is really an expert in circularity and has pushed a lot around the culture and the training. So her view is that really, if you want to make this shift, you've got to bring the staff along with you. And a lot of the things that she focuses on with the circularity programs is around how do you engage with the staff and how they feel ownership of it. And so it does take a little bit extra time to shift your recycling between the different bins, and maybe you do need to do more at work than happens at home. But I do see that the generations coming in have had more training, have had more understanding of this, and do see it as more important. I've seen it for a long time, given how, and my first few organizations were not that interested that I worked for, and it's just taken time. But yeah, I've seen a cultural shift come in, and you should ride that wave. It's a great wave to look to leverage.
And the competition for talent's always there. If an organisation wants the best and brightest, they've got to be able to appeal to a broader set of interests than just the remuneration, I suspect, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've made choices of companies I'm going to work for around that as well.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. Tell us a little bit more about circular procurement in action that you wrote with your colleague Helene Carpenter, please, Matt.
Yeah, so that's book we put together. My driver was the example I used around the bank in London. I'm like, this is crazy. And as I got more into the carbon emission and trying to decarbonize supply chains, there's an obvious easy win here with circularity. And most organizations do have offices and do have fit outs and do look to leverage real estate, which would generally be after data centers, their second biggest area of emissions. So it's a big impact, and it doesn't take that much to change, but it's a way of thinking, as we talked about in the session. And so the book kind of runs through how to use that for fit outs and the facilities management. So we go into quite a few case studies and examples and what you can look to leverage. It's a relatively small book to read through, but it's a practical one that we want people to be able to leverage and pick up and start using the next day.
Excellent. We'll be including that on the recommended list of reading for our diplomas and advanced diplomas to the University of Queensland, and for our CIPS students as part of AcademyGlobal Centre of Excellence as well. Matt Langley, always good to have a conversation with you. Really appreciate your time and talking us through and providing a very, very helpful and practical overview. Thank you.
Thank you.